The Economist magazine, right? I think probably most of us appreciate and love the writing in The Economist magazine, also Newsweek, or also Business Week, but they have a good way of turning a phrase, and in a recent issue, 2 weeks ago, they had a column on business education and the problems with business education. And what the point of this is that business education had to change dramatically if business schools wanted to put out into the economy something other than, and this is the great economist, only the economist can do this, jargon spewing economic vandals. Isn't that good? Jargon spewing economic vandals. I mean, 4 words, bang. So clever, I think. Well, what I would argue is that, sadly, sort of the bad news is that I do believe that business education today is in the main actually producing jargon spewing economic vandals. And it's sad, and it's accidental. I don't think it's purposefully doing that, but it is not an accident that it produces too many jargon spewing economic vandals. That's the bad news. The good news is that we at the Rotman School have been working assiduously for the last 11 years at figuring out how to produce something else. Creative people who will go out and make the world a better place through business. And I would tell you, after 11 years of working on this, I am actually supremely confident that this will make a difference. Why am I? It's all because of the students. The students don't want to be jargon spewing economic vandals. They want to be something else. They want to be contributors to society. They want to be creative, but business education hasn't enabled them, empowered them to do that to enough an extent. So I thought my story would be a little bit about what have we been up to in these 11 years. What's the problem with business education that's created this phenomenon that The Economist magazine so cleverly described. What I would argue is that in business education, we want to have 3 things. We would like business education that is broad, that is deep, and that is dynamic. And what I would argue is that the reason we have the problems we have today is because business education, MBA education, where it should be deep is shallow, where it should be broad is narrow, and where it should be dynamic, it is static. That's the problem. It is, in my humble estimation, not because we don't teach enough ethics or we don't have enough practical, experienced people in the classrooms. These are the critiques of business education that you see commonly. I just don't think that's the problem. That is not the right diagnosis, and we're not going to have the right fix with the wrong diagnosis. So what do I mean by it is shallow, not deep? It is shallow, I believe, to the extent that we do not ask our students to go deep in understanding the models that we teach them. And so they do go out into the world and apply them without understanding enough about them. So famously, Fisher, Black, and Myron Scholes created the Black-Scholes option pricing theorem. These are very, very clever men, and they said, as clever men are wont to do, this is for pricing a European call option of limited duration in a non-dividend paying stock. You got that? Anything else you use this for is a bad idea. What is the Black-Scholes option pricing theorem used throughout the modern economy? For valuing American, not European, call options of long duration for dividend-paying stocks, as if that's what Myron Scholes and Fisher Black figured out. That's our fault. Our fault being the business education fraternity. We need to teach our students more deeply what's behind the models that they're learning, what the limitations of those models are, so that they don't slice and dice subprime mortgages 6 ways to Sunday because it's technically capable to do, but they do not understand the economics behind that in the economy. So we have to cause them to go deeper. It's shallow now. Broad instead of narrow. Why do I say business education is narrow? Heck, you do a whole bunch of subjects, right, in business education. Well, that's partly the problem. It is infinitely easier as a researcher, as a professor, to teach narrow slices of the business discipline. It is much easier to teach finance if you don't have to worry about the implications of finance for marketing or organizational behavior or operations. Right? It's also easier to teach finance, if we want to stick with finance, if we make a slight simplifying assumption that all men and women are rational, economic, profit-maximizing creatures and don't care about anything else. It turns out that that's unbelievably handy in creating the equations and, that are used in finance. It's terrific. The problem is, it doesn't really work that way. And the minute you drop that assumption and say, well, actually, they have these things called emotions, and they actually aren't profit maximizing exactly, and they care about other things, all the modeling gets a lot harder. And it gets a lot fuzzier, and you can be less declarative about how things ought to be. But that is broadening your view. And also, then if you maybe ask questions like, what should the role of business be in society? How can it make the world a better place? Things like that. Well, it gets even worse. It gets harder to do, right? And I would argue that business education, by and large, has stuck to the easy thing to do, to say, you will be teaching finance, and you'll be teaching operations, and you'll be teaching marketing, and you'll be teaching OB, and please do not talk to one another. Just teach your stuff, and the students will somehow figure out how to make it all work. So narrow where it should be broad. Static where it should be dynamic. Here, business education focuses to a far greater extent than it needs to on how to decide from among or between options. You could do A or you could do B. Now let's analyze A, let's analyze B, and see which has got the higher NPV or IRR or whatever criteria you want, and choose that. As opposed to, if you got A and you got B and they aren't so hot, how could you create a C that's better? And what I would argue is that business education, as it's constructed now, is about 95% about choosing from among existing options and about 5% about creating new options. So if you think about it, if you think about the notion of jargon spewing, that would be shallow, not deep, right? Economic vandals, not thinking about the economy more broadly, the role in society, and not creating anything new, shallow, not deep. It is no surprise that that is the critique, and in fact, I think it's a very accurate and valid critique. What can be done about it? I think lots. I think lots, and as I say, we are doing that. Taking shallowness and turning deeper. In our MBA program, what we do is teach students in year one, required course, the very first course they take, and the capstone of the first year courses on model building. Understanding the limitations of models, understanding how they're built, having practice in creating models. And we do it first thing in first year, so in part, they can be asking the professors in each and every class, gee, professor, where does that model break down? What are the fringes of that model where it's no longer applicable? What are your fundamental assumptions behind that model? So if the professors don't want to do that, if they want to give them the cookie cutter, just do it this way and don't worry about it, kiddies, routine, they will have somebody pushing back on them. Broad rather than narrow, we teach them integrative thinking. We teach them how to build models across the individual disciplines. We've created an AIC Center for Corporate Citizenship that teaches them how to think about business's broader role in society. We've created a collaborative for health sector strategy to figure out how the business principles apply to the healthcare sector. We've created the Martin Prosperity Institute, brought Richard Ford, a great urban geographer, in to help students understand how corporations have to influence the environments, the jurisdictions, the cities in which they work to make them better. And interesting enough, students do not say, oh God, why are you doing this to us? They actually lap it up. MBA students actually lap that up. Third, and maybe most germane to this conference, is dynamic rather than static. We're not interested in teaching these students to choose from among options. In fact, that's easy. It just is easy. You don't actually need graduate education for that, I don't think. What you need high, sophisticated education for, I think, is when facing a situation where you need to create something that has never been seen before, never been done before, that's better than anything out there. You need to learn how to do that. And in that, we've taken what we believe is the best of design education and fused it with the best of business education to be able to teach our students to be business designers. They actually work on projects. They learn theory about that. And this is one area where I've worked with David Kelly closely and Patrick Whitney. We're fellow travelers in this quest to not just say you need to learn about design, and then you need to learn about business, and good luck to you. Please put those two things together, which I'm afraid is too much what goes on now with business and design. We push it down to the students to try and figure out fundamental theory. We've got to do better than that. We can't just say, you should think about design, you should think about business, and when you figure it out, please come back and tell us. So we're creating ways that students, models, techniques that students can use to link design, deep user understanding, ethnography, with visualization prototyping with a link directly to business strategy, how you create activity systems that win. And it is interesting to me how many constituents absolutely love this. So one, the students love it. We have 260 full-time students per year in 2 years, so that's 520 full-time students. The Business Design Club now is 140 students. Right? So over a quarter of our students are extremely interested in this, and they take our second year courses on this. Two, corporations are really interested. Recruiters actually are interested in this kind of student. So I don't think the corporate world is uninterested in it. They've just not believed that business schools produce that kind of person. So once you produce them, I think the businesses are terrifically interested. And they're terrifically interested. We do projects. The students do projects for fantastic companies around the world, from Nestle to SAP to Procter & Gamble to Steelcase to Medtronic. All these companies come because they want students of this sort to work on their projects. So I believe that this is one of these situations where we have this because it's the way it's done. Right? This is the way business education is done, and I believe it is going to the lowest common denominator in some sense. The easiest possible thing to do is being done in business education. It doesn't have to be that way. I think you can fill out that entire box, and I think the yield gain for the economy is terrific. And one of the things to think about, if you can believe it, 22% of all students in America in the university system are in a business program. 28% of all graduate students in a business program. I think it is just a dreadful thing that we're sub-optimizing to the extent that we are on that. That's the downside. The upside is if we can transform business education, which I think is absolutely doable, we'll take that huge economic engine and educational engine and turn it for the better. And that is our quest at the Rotman School. Thank you very much.